Hey everybody, how's everybody doing today? I'm pumped to be in Milwaukee. This is going to be great. I just want to first take a moment to condemn the act of evil that occurred the other day and the assassination attempt on President Trump. We're just so thankful that the Lord protected him, and I just can't even imagine how close that was. And so, just in a few days, we're going to be putting him forward as the nominee for our party for President of the United States, and just super excited for that. So this reminds me, a couple years ago at the Democrat National Convention, there was a group of reporters that were running in, and they see this little boy over there, and he's selling puppies. And he's saying, "Come get your Democrat puppies here. Get your Democrat puppies." And the press is like, "Oh, a cute little boy," and they go on in. And 2 weeks later was the Republican National Convention. And the press is there, and they're running in, and they see a boy over there selling puppies again. And he's saying, "Come get your Republican puppies. Get your Republican puppies here." And the press is like so curious. They're like, "Man, I wonder if that's the same little boy that 2 weeks ago was selling Democrat puppies." So curiosity gets the better of them, and so they go over and they say, "Are you the same boy that was here 2 weeks ago selling Democrat puppies?" He said, "Yes, sir, I sure am." And they said, "Well, what changed between 2 weeks ago to today?" And he looked at them and he's like, "Well, now the puppies have their eyes open." Oh, man. Just making sure I was in the right audience here. But we're here this week to fight for the American dream and really our way of life. To our founders, the American dream meant freedom to worship, freedom to assemble, freedom to speak one's mind. It meant that there was no limit to what someone could accomplish. It meant freedom from the government, not control by the government. The American dream is really the belief that everyone is capable of anything he sets his mind to. That each of us is endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that we all in America have endless opportunities that if we're willing to work hard for them. And now, nearly 250 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, it's time for us to reclaim that American dream. I love how Ronald Reagan would say it. He said, "Government is not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem." We all know that in here. A perfect example of this is in our education system. During the COVID pandemic, blue states across the country, it's so important we don't forget this, we're bending to the will of the teachers' unions, and we're shutting down schools for sometimes up to 2 years. And as a result of that, an entire generation of students were cheated out of their right to an education for the illusion of safety. And in Oklahoma, we believe that you don't put the Constitution in the attic just because somebody in Washington, D.C. tells you to. States like Oklahoma, we put students first. We kept all of our schools open. And I was one of the only governors in the country that refused to do a mask mandate statewide. Y'all remember all the mask mandates? It was unbelievable. Nationally, public education has seen a 20% drop in language arts proficiencies, a 37% drop in math proficiency. And even after seeing these results from these lockdowns, blue states are still deferring to teachers' unions. They want parents in the dark about what's being taught to their children. In red states, we call that stuff crazy. We're pushing back, and we're seeing huge education freedom choice movements across the country. In Oklahoma, we passed the very, very best school choice plan in the entire country. And now, every parent, regardless of income, has a refundable tax credit or a voucher to go to a school of their choice. And here's what I tell people. Listen, Rich people already have school choice. They can send their kids to any school that they want. And if you were governor and you had to talk to the single moms that are trapped, or the single dads, or people without resources, and they're in school districts where their kids are getting a failing education, it would break your heart. Now everything's possible in Oklahoma. We also became the very first state in the country to approve a religious charter school. Okay? We're so excited about that too. St. Isidore is a Catholic school that's going to be set up in the state of Oklahoma. The American dream is making sure that every kid has the opportunity to get the education that best fits their needs. So let's talk about government control versus free markets in the energy sector. You know, in blue states, the government is trying to control what car you drive. They're trying to say what stoves you can have in your house. I mean, it's getting weirder and weirder. On day one in office, think about this. President Biden started putting up roadblocks to American energy dominance. He canceled the Keystone XL pipeline. You remember that? Okay, Cushing, Oklahoma. Cushing, Oklahoma is right in the middle of our state. That is the largest commercial storage of oil in the entire country. It's 100 million barrels. Did you know that there's already 2 pipelines from Canada to Cushing, Oklahoma? One of them's called the Keystone. The Keystone XL was going to be the 3rd pipeline. Okay, it is absolute common sense that the safest way to move oil and natural gas is through pipelines instead of train or trucks. It's just unbelievable. This all gets so political. West Texas Intermediate, WTI, is priced not in West Texas, but from Cushing, Oklahoma. And then the pipelines go on down to Houston and Louisiana to meet the needs of our citizens there. You know, President Biden has leased fewer acres of land for energy projects than any other president in history. I give you the stats. It's just unbelievable. Because of Joe Biden's anti-energy American energy policies, taxpayers are now stuck spending about $1.7 trillion in hidden energy costs. This is crazy because states like Oklahoma can meet the need of Americans and our allies around the world, in Pennsylvania and Texas and other states. Oklahoma, we're so proud of our all-of-the-above energy story. And I'll tell you real quick, we're number 6 in the country in oil production. We're number 5 in natural gas production. But here's what people don't realize. We're also number 3 in the country in electricity generated by wind, okay? We have an all-of-the-above approach. We're one of only 4 states that 45% of our energy comes from renewables. Okay, that blows away the people on some of the coasts that are just the green stuff, that they think about states like Oklahoma that are leading the way on an all-of-the-above approach. President Biden also halted, did y'all see his LNG ban? Okay, LNG exports, he's banning LNG exports from the U.S., which is really hurting our allies. It's denying our allies around the world access to clean, reliable energy. And it really drives our allies into the arms of our adversaries. Here's a news flash. Every country has to heat their homes and their businesses. They have to drive to work, take their kids to school. They need energy. And so they're going to get it from us, or they're going to get it from people that may not like us very much. I always talk about energy as a national security issue. Energy security is really your national security. Because the Biden administration has done everything it can to squash our domestic energy supply, the U.S. and our allies are less safe. We have seen unprecedented aggression from adversaries around the world. Nothing is more evident than when we watched Hamas' brutal attack on Israel on October 7th. Myself and Governor Abbott took a trip over there, and we met with Netanyahu, and we met with President Herzog as well, and saw what was happening. It was unbelievable. It'd be like at a concert in the U.S., terrorists coming in with machine guns and just mowing down our young people. We visited them in the hospital. It was the most brutal attack you could imagine. And here's the deal. By lifting sanctions on Iran, the Biden administration has made them flush with cash right now. And they're using it to fund terrorist groups around the world. Let me tell you something. A Trump administration would immediately put sanctions back on Iran and bring stability back to the region. The other thing President Trump is passionate about is reducing our reliance on China. Right now, China controls 60% of the critical mineral supply chain and about 75% of the manufacturing. And critical minerals, if you think about it, they go into everything from our smartphones to satellites in space to our F-35 fighters. In America, we have the workforce, we've got the technology. A lot of times we invented this processing technology and the resources to bring this supply chain back to America. We're leading the way in Oklahoma. We've made announcement after announcement because of our business-friendly approach. We just landed USA Rare Earth, which is the first ever mineral to magnet manufacturer in the U.S. And I encourage you to check out my op-ed I wrote in the Wall Street Journal last summer on this exact topic. And it was talking about America needs to have a strategic stockpile for critical minerals like we do in the oil and gas space. We need to set up relationships around the world in Africa and in South America to make sure that we develop those relationships because China is out in front doing those. You know, it's no secret that the Biden administration has been terrible for our economy. And over the last few years, Americans have been choked by inflation. It's hurting Oklahomans, it's hurting Americans all over this country. We're spending 20% more on everything that we need. You know, when President Trump left office, inflation was below 2%. And in 2021, your average gallon of gasoline was $2.40 a gallon. Today, it's $3.50. That's causing everything to cost more. But for Democrats, that's not a mistake. They want more reliance on the government. They've taken programs that were supposed to be a hand up, and they've really turned them into a hammock where people are sitting in them. The deficit spending to fund these social programs has caused our national debt to skyrocket. And now, when you really think about it, we are spending a quarter of our income, okay? A quarter of your income is on interest-only payments. Right now, our interest-only payments on our national debt is more than we spend on our national defense. Just think about that for a second. You know, I like to describe it like this. When I graduated, I went to Oklahoma State, I got an accounting degree, got my first job in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I bought my first house right across at 8th and Harvard, right across from TU. And I spent $66,000 on my first house. I was pumped. I was dating my wife, Sarah, at the time. We've been married for 26 years, by the way. But thank you. $66,000 for my first house. My house payment was about $550. And I remember making my first house payment. I was 27 years old. And I looked at it was $550, and only $49 went towards principal. And I was like, what? And the rest was interest. But at least I knew that in 30 years, when I looked at the amortization schedule, that I was going to own my house at 8th and Harvard. Folks, we don't do principal and interest on our national debt. It's interest only. That means we're never going to pay it off. And it gets worse because right now, they keep piling on top of it. So our revenue is about $4.4 trillion. You would think they would spend about $4.4 trillion. They spend $6.4 trillion, right? They're spending $2 trillion over what our income is, and that's just making it harder and harder and harder and harder for the taxpayers. But at the end of it all, if they control our education, if they control our energy and our economy, they'll next go after our ethics. You know, it's really already happening. We are living, I tell Oklahomans, I mean, this is like, I'm living in the twilight zone here when people think it's okay to perform sex change surgeries on children. They think that a child who can't get a tattoo, can't buy a gun or vote, but it's okay for them to have life-altering surgeries. They think it's okay to expose children to inappropriate sexual material regardless of their age. They believe that men should be able to compete against women in sports, hold records. I mean, we're seeing that all the time, like, hey, this dude broke this female swimming and track record. They believe it's okay for men to be incarcerated in women's prisons or chained in women's locker rooms. We know that's crazy, and it's not happening in Oklahoma, I'll tell you that. I was the first governor to ban men and women's sports. Thank you. The Washington Post called me and like, Governor, you signed this controversial bill. And I was like, it's really not controversial in Oklahoma. We know the difference between boys and girls. But I also had to sign an executive order to define what a woman was, to make sure that women weren't going into, or men weren't going into women's prisons, because we were seeing that happen in other states. They know if they can break apart our families, that they can exert even more control over us. And, we're seeing record levels of fatherlessness across our country right now. Today, nearly 18 million children are living without a father in the home. The statistics paint a grim picture. So 71% of those who drop out of high school grew up without a father. 71% of those that drop out. 66% of juveniles that are in state custody for some kind of problem grew up without a father. So in Oklahoma, we're tackling that. We're promoting fatherhood. We know that the best place for a kid is at home with their mom and their dad. And in red states, we're fighting for families so they can keep fighting for the American dream. And you guys are here today because you believe in freedoms, not government control. You know that there's hope in that American dream, and it is worth all of us fighting for. So I just thank y'all so much. You are the leaders of your community. You're here at the Heritage Foundation, so you're making sure that you're here taking this message back to your states. And it's clear that the American dream can't survive another 4 years of Joe Biden. That's why it's so important that we bring common sense back to the White House. I'm grateful for groups like the Heritage Foundation who are advocating for freedoms. They're engaging the decision makers and educating Americans about the most important issues that are facing us today. The founders of our country envisioned that there's no limitation to what we can accomplish, but it does matter who we choose to lead us. And there's only one choice in this next election. Thank you all so much for being engaged and for working to keep that American dream alive. God bless you, and may God continue to bless this great nation of ours. Thank you so much.